everybody, Spooky Marshmallow here, and today I am doing this video a little bit different than what I normally do. I'm kind of going to be a little podcast style, if you will, for this video. So I am talking about one of my favorite couples in the whole wide world today, and that is Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, the Warrens have been ghost hunting since way before I was born. Like in the 60s, I believe, is actually when they started. Might have been the 70s, but I'm thinking that I read it was the 60s. So I'm pretty sure that everyone's heard of Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are super popular thanks to the Conjuring movies that have come out and have featured them as well. Yes, I'm on my computer just flashing up different pictures of them. I could have done this video a little differently, you know, where I did a voiceover and all that, but my computer is not cooperating with me at the moment, so I'm just going to do it this way. It's much easier for me as far as getting across what I'm trying to say. Okay, so if you don't know who Ed and Lorraine Warren are, let me tell you. So I'm just going to read some little tidbits of information that I have. You might recall in my previous book club for this channel, I read The Demonologist, which was the some extraordinary stories, or case files, I should say, from Ed and Lorraine Warren. Excellent book. If you have the chance, you definitely should read it. It's called The Demonologist. But anyway, let me get into a little bit more background on Ed and Lorraine Warren. So we're going to do this podcast style, like I said. So grab you a cup of hot tea, pop, water, whatever it is that you like to drink. Grab a snack, get comfy, and here we go. So Ed Warren was born September 7th, 1926, and he passed away August 23rd of 2006. Lorraine Warren was born in January 31st, 1927, and passed away April 18th, 2019. It was a very sad day for me. They were American paranormal investigators and authors associated with prominent cases of alleged hauntings. Ed was a self-taught and self-professed demonologist, author, and lecturer. Lorraine professed to be a clairvoyant and a light trance medium who worked closely with her husband. So let's talk briefly about what it means to be clairvoyant. So in other words, she was a psychic, and her ability was that she could see and communicate with the dead. A light trance medium is a little bit different. A light trance medium is someone who they can perform a seance, and they can actually accept a spirit to channel through their bodies. You know, they can let the spirit talk and communicate through them. And so for psychics to have both of those abilities is just phenomenal. I mean, that's, you know, back in the day, it was a little sketchy, you know. People claimed to have those abilities, but they really didn't. They really were not light trance mediums. They might have really been clairvoyant, but they were not really light trance mediums. But I feel that Lorraine actually had that ability, or at least I want to believe that Lorraine had that ability, and that it was actually legit, and a legit ability that she had, and she was not just saying it to get attention. In 1952, the Warrens founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They authored many books about the paranormal and about their private investigations into various reports of paranormal activity. They claim to have investigated well over 10,000 cases during their career. That's a lot. According to the Warrens, the official website of the NESPR, which stands for the New England Society for Psychic Research, there was a magazine and several other sources that used a variety of individuals, including medical doctors, researchers, police officers, nurses, college students, and members of the clergy in its investigations. So, meaning that when they would go on an investigation, they would take several different people with them along on their investigations that were, like I just said, doctors, researchers, police officers, nurses. They would take all these people with them just to prove, to have eyewitnesses that they were not crazy. So, and that in itself tells me a lot, that they were willing to do that. That's a lot. Both of them, by the way, were born in Connecticut. So what I read when I was reading The Demonologist was when they first got together and they were first married, they would drive around and they would be drawn to certain homes. Okay. And so they would go to these houses and they would sit in the car and they would draw these houses, and then they would paint the houses, and then they would go up to the door of those houses and they would offer their painting in exchange for money, and then they would say, oh, by the way, we think you have a demon, or we think your house is haunted. We are psychics. Can we come in and do an investigation? I'm serious. That's what I read in The Demonologist, in the book. It's in there that they, in their early married life, they did that. And that's how they made some money. So, and they traveled around different places and did that. I think it even said that they did that while their daughter Judy was little. I think they did that as well. I just can't imagine. Like, I don't even know how I would react if someone came to my door and said that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know that it started, like, way back in the 40s is when they were first married. Or, yeah, the 40s was when they were first married, 1945. Gosh, that is crazy. That's older than my dad. And he's like, my dad was born in 47. That's just craziness. Okay, so let's move on. So, if you weren't aware of it, Ed and Lorraine were, they responded to Annabelle, the story of Annabelle. So let me just read to you some of that I have in my notes here. So, according to the Warrens, in the year 1968, two roommates claimed their Raggedy Ann doll was possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. The Warrens took the doll, telling the roommates it was being manipulated by an inhuman presence, and put it on display at the family's Occult Museum. The legend of the doll inspired several films in the Conjuring universe and is a motif in many others. So the Annabelle story, like, it touches on it at the beginning of the Conjuring, the first Conjuring movie. But it goes into more detail if you read the book. If you read The Demonologist, the book, it goes into a little bit more detail about the Annabelle case. The Perron family, which we've all grown to know and love now. In 1971, the Warrens claimed that the Harrisville, Rhode Island home of the Perron family was haunted by a witch who had lived there in the early 19th century. According to the Warrens, Bathsheba Sherman cursed the land so that whoever lived there somehow died a terrible death. The story is the subject of the 2013 film The Conjuring. Lorraine Warren was a consultant to the production and appeared in a cameo role in the film. She is actually sitting in the audience in the scene where they're giving a lecture in the beginning. You see Lorraine sitting in the front row in the audience. Very interesting. And I always love it. Like when I see that part come up, I'm like, oh, there's Lorraine. I'm so excited. A reporter for USA Today covered the film's supposed factual grounding. And there has been a lot of speculation on if the whole Bathsheba story is real, if it's made up. My thoughts are that I think some of it's real, but I also think some of it's exaggerated as well, even by the Warrens. Was it haunted? Yeah, because I've read the books. I've read, what is it, House of Darkness, House of Light, I think. I read those books, and I do believe that it was haunted, but whether it was haunted by this Bathsheba, I don't know. It was Bathsheba a wicked witch who cursed the land? It's possible maybe she dabbled in witchcraft, but yeah, I think the story just kind of got a little bit blown out of proportion, to be quite honest. All right, so next up we have the Amityville Case. And if you have never seen the Amityville horror movie, I highly recommend it. It's a very good film. So the Warrens are best known for their involvement in the 1975 Amityville horror, in which New York couple George and Kathy Lutz claimed that their house was haunted by a violent demonic presence, so intense that it eventually drove them out of their home. The Amityville horror conspiracy authors Stephen and Roxanne Catley characterized the case as a hoax. Lorraine Warren told a reporter for the Express-Times newspaper that the Amityville horror was not a hoax. The reported haunting was the basis for the 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, and adapted into the 1979 and 2005 films of the same name, while also serving an inspiration for the film series that followed. The Warrens' version of events is partially adapted and portrayed in the opening sequence of The Conjuring 2. According to Benjamin Radford, the story was refuted by eyewitnesses, investigations, and forensic evidence. In 1979, lawyer William Weber stated that he, Jay Anson, and the occupants invented the horror story over many bottles of wine. So the story of the house is that a guy kills he goes crazy one night and kills his whole family in the house. And then the Lutzes move in, and they claim that a bunch of demonic stuff went on into the house and that they could no longer live there. Of course, conspiracy, people saying, no, that's not true. They just wanted to get out of their lease. They just wanted to, not pay on the house anymore. They wanted out of their mortgage. Anything they could think of to get, rid of the house. That's what they wanted to do because they couldn't afford it. Well, in my opinion, I think it is actual fact that the killings did occur, but whether I believe the Lutzes or not, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. It's kind of like with, the Perron family. I don't know what to believe. I want to believe that it's true, that, the stuff that they're claiming really did happen and that they would not make something up like that. But you know what? People are crazy. So who knows? And the fact that the Warrens were called in You know, I have all the faith in the world on the Warrens. I think they were actually legit, like they said. But maybe they just added a little bit more flair to the story of it being haunted. I don't know. I don't know. Only them and God know, right? So there was a large number of other cases that they were involved in. You get the idea. They were involved in some pretty intense cases over their several decades of paranormal debunking and investigations and things like that. This is the real Annabelle, by the way. The doll that Lorraine is holding, and then the doll to the left that has the sign underneath her, that's the real Annabelle. The Annabelle that you see on the right, that was just used for the movie. That was not... And why they used a doll like that and not a Raggedy Ann doll, I don't really know. That never really made sense to me. When I first saw the film and they were talking, you know, in the beginning of The Conjuring, when they're showing the case of Annabelle, I'm like, that's not Annabelle. Annabelle's a Raggedy Ann doll. What the heck? Anyway, so other activities that they were involved in. So the Warrens were responsible for training several self-described demonologists, including Dave Constantine and their nephew, John Zaffis. How cool is that? I have been a fan of John Zaffis for years, and I did not know until like recently that he was Ed's nephew. I had no idea. I was stunned, but I was excited at the same time. So if you are unaware of who John Zaffis is, he calls himself the Haunted Collector. And he has a museum, much like the Warrens did, where he goes and he does investigations, and he will take items from the investigations that he does that he believes are actually haunted. And it's very interesting, the show. It's on the Travel Channel. It's been out for quite some time now, for years, but it never gets old. Like, every time it's on, I have to watch it because I just think it's such a neat show. And I love the concept. And I love the fact that, you know, what John's doing, you know, kind of like what Zach has begun doing now. Zach Bagans, that is, where, you know, he takes objects that are supposedly haunted and he's keeping them in his museum. I just find that fascinating. I think it's really cool. And it just seems like he's like this really cool dude. Like, you could just sit and talk with him for hours and hours and hours, and he's very chill and very down to earth. Something that Ed and Lorraine would say regularly, and they strongly believed in this. They were Roman Catholics, and they always said that demonic forces are likely to possess those who lack faith. And it's interesting, when I read that at first, I immediately in my head said, nope, that's not true. It's not true. But then another thought crossed my mind, and it took me to Whisper's Estate. Now, to my knowledge, Ed and Lorraine Warren have never been to Whisper's Estate before, but I have. And from reading the journals from other investigators that went to Whisper's Estate, the things that they wrote in those journals, it leads me to believe that what the Warrens said is true. Now, I have strong faith, and I had my crucifixes with me. I had my holy water. I had my rosary with me. I had my tiger's eye with me. I went prepared for battle, pretty much. But if you walk in there all willy-nilly and you're a skeptic and you're like, oh, is there a God? I don't know. Maybe. Never met him, but maybe. it seems like that was what was written in a lot of the journal entries from other investigators. It seems like they went in without any protection whatsoever. No holy water, no crucifixes, no armor, if you will, no spiritual armor whatsoever. And they went in there unprotected and things went bad for them. They were scratched. They were pushed downstairs. They were pushed. What have you. None of that happened to me or anybody that was in my group. We were all spiritually prepared. And so after thinking about that, it made perfect sense. When the Warrens said that, then it made sense to me. And it took me back to Whisper's estate, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're onto something there. That is so true. So, yeah, it gave me like this whole new outlook on things, a totally different look on things. And it just shocked me. Like it was an eye-opener to think that. And it just, I don't know, like it gave me the chills when I read that, because I'm like, oh my gosh, the more that I thought about that quote and then compared it to my personal experiences, with Whisper's estate, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. Okay, let's move on. So, their Occult Museum. So, in addition to investigations, Lorraine ran the Warrens Occult Museum, which is now closed, in the back of her house in Monroe, Connecticut, with the help of her son-in-law, Tony Spira. The museum displayed many claimed haunted objects and artifacts from around the world. Many of the artifacts from their most famous investigations were featured. And I think that's just so interesting. But I want to know why it's closed. I don't know is it closed because of COVID? Like, did they just shut it down because, of everything shutting down with COVID and they just didn't reopen it? Or did they do it out of respect for the couple? I don't know. I'm curious. Like, I would really like to know why they shut it down, just out of curiosity. Something else that I do want to mention briefly, there's so many rumors and myths going around about the couple. Like, the most outrageous thing that I have heard about that couple is that Ed had a live-in woman living with him, and they were in a relationship, and Lorraine knew about it and she allowed it. Now, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my entire life. I'm sorry. I don't believe that whatsoever. I think that was just something that somebody made up, and then, it spiraled from there. I don't believe that for a second. If you see video clips of these two together, of Ed and Lorraine together, they are very much in love with each other. And it shows. I mean, I don't know. I watched an interview with their daughter, Judy, and it's been some time back now. It's been a while back since I watched that interview with her. But in that interview, she talked about how much her parents loved each other. So, I'm just going to put to bed right now that rumor and that myth about him having a live-in woman lover. No, I don't buy it for a second. It's just not true. Like I said, they loved each other so much, and it definitely shows. Definitely. So if you ever have a chance to see video of them two together doing an interview or what have you, you can just see how much they adored and loved each other. And my God, they were married forever. I mean, seriously, they were married in 1945. Come on. They've been married longer than my dad's been alive. That just blows my mind. And he's 70-something years old. That's crazy. That's crazy. But I can only hope that I will be married that long too, to the same person all those years. So, Let me give you the bibliography real quick. The information of where I got all of these juicy tidbits that I just have told you about now. So, from the book Ghost Hunters, True Story from the World's Most Famous Demonologists by Ed Warren, Ghost Tracks by Cheryl A. Wicks with Ed and Lorraine Warren, Graveyard, True Hauntings from an Old New England Cemetery by Ed Warden, The Haunted, The True Story of One Family's Nightmare by Robert Curran, Satan's Harvest by Ed and Lorraine Warren, and Werewolf, A True Story of Demonic Possession by Ed Warren. There has been several different documentaries about the Warrens and different they've been on talk shows galore all over the world, not just here in the United States. You got to remember, they traveled everywhere. They were known worldwide, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. They were renowned paranormal investigators. And Ed was one of very few people that the Catholic Church gave permission to perform exorcisms. So that says a lot in itself right there. If the Catholic Church believed that Ed knew what he was doing and that he was telling the truth and that he had this spiritual calling, if the Catholic Church believes it, then it must be true, because the Catholic Church is not going to mess with that. So, on that note, I'm going to wrap up this podcast-like video. And, leave down in the comments section below what your favorite Ed and Lorraine story is, or movie that has portrayed them. Like, which is your favorite Conjuring, what have you. We're curious to know. Let me know what you think. Like I said, they're one of my favorite couples in the whole wide world. I never met them personally, but I just adored them. Like, I really adored how they loved each other and how they worked as a team. They were a powerhouse paranormal investigative team, the two of them. And their stories must be true when you've got witnesses that are cops and nurses and doctors and what have you backing up what you're saying. Then it must be true. I mean, come on. It's fascinating. Their whole story, it's just so fascinating to me. They traveled all the time, and they traveled around the world all the time. The things they did together and things like that. It's just so interesting. So, if you want to do more research on the Warrens, on your own, by all means. But let us know down in the comments section below. Like I said, like, what are your thoughts about the Warrens? Do you think they were fakes, or do you believe in what they did and they were actually legit? Curious to see. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And this is Spooky Marshmallow saying, stay spooky, my friends.